What is good, guys? It's Ronald, also known as Youcapper from sportsmemo.com. Welcome to another episode of Let's Cap. As you guys can see, I am not alone today. My guest for the day is one of the top handicappers in the game. I haven't known this guy personally for a very long time, but from the first time we worked together on Jay's show, we instantly vibed in this short period of time. Also, of knowing him, he's helped me become a better and smarter better. And also, one of my bigger influences in why I decided to quit my job and focus on sports betting and the Youcapper brand full time itself. I'm really blessed to call him a friend now. And y'all know him because he made you guys a lot of cheddar this NBA season. Shark, my brother, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Great to talk to you. I mean, obviously, you made the comment. You followed us for a period of time. And one of the best things in this life, in this sphere, if we're being super honest, is somebody like myself doing something that maybe I was a little uncomfortable doing at the very beginning, and somebody like you watching and then doing something that maybe you were uncomfortable doing, quitting your job, following your passion. And here we are, winning Wednesday, game one of the Western Conference Finals. I'll let you lead the way, and let's have a great little show here, my man.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into that, I do want to do two things. First, if you guys are on Twitter and commenting, I'm not going to be able to see it. So if you want to get your comments seen or posted up here in the video, please head over to the YouTube page. All right, just get that done. Head over to YouTube page so we can see your guys' comments. Second, I do want to ask you guys, ask Shark a few questions so you guys can know a little bit more about him. Obviously, you guys watch him on the shows. You guys see him on Twitter live and all that stuff too. But we want to be able to capture a little bit more of how Shark got into capping, his capping style and things like that. So first, Shark, can you talk a little bit how you got into capping, when you started sports betting and things like that? Obviously you've been doing it for a long time, but when did you really see yourself as a top handicapper?
Well, there's a big difference between when I started and when I thought I was a top handicapper. And I think there was probably about a decade gap, if I'm being really honest. Go back to about 2007, 2008. I think just like any other sports handicapper in the world, you're a fan. You watch games, you're a competitor yourself. Oftentimes you played sports yourself at a high level. And you take that competition to prognosticating the game. You're talking to your boys, who's going to win, and then secondarily, who's going to cover the spread. And that's where things get really tricky. And of course, that's the difference between a great handicapper and a great fan. Great fans oftentimes can really shoot the shit in a round table and tell you who's going to win. But can they tell you against a 7.5, a 10.5, or a plus 4.5? And when I first started doing this, just like anybody else in the world, I was a complete fish. We would have called this Fishy Waters Nation. And I really didn't know much. I didn't know much about the lines. I didn't even know the difference between money line and the spread. And it just goes to show you, anybody in the world at any point really does start from basically a zero quotient. And you grow, you learn, you interact. Back in the day, Ronald, you and I are the same age. Shout out to class of 2003 high school.
2003.
Yeah. A great year in the life it was. But, you go back to when we were coming out of college in 2006, 2007, there wasn't really a lot of content on sports betting. There wasn't a lot of know-how. It was very backwoods. It was bookies. It was not even Venmo, PayPal. It was a lot of handoffs, if we're being super honest. I mean, I have a lot of stories about driving up to guys' cars on the side of the road and picking up like stacks out of the middle of a car. And those are some slightly different stories. Shout out to Staten Island there. But real talk, it was incredibly backwoods. It was nothing like it is now. And I know we have a lot of followers who are under 25 who have lived a totally different lifestyle to us. And it's crazy to say we're only 35, 36 years old, but things have changed immensely in the last 10 years. And of course, centering on that now, this is one of the biggest booming industries in the country by a mile. And of course, it centers on that fact that people love sports, they love to watch sports, and the idea that you could make money off picking a game that you already know a lot about the players and the teams is why sports betting is so agreeable across the planet. It's a passion of mine. I know it's a passion of yours, and it all starts from that. Fandom leads to betting, and it's also why it's so difficult, because being a fan does not translate to being a professional psychologist or a professional prognosticator of statistical frequencies and numbers. It's difficult stuff. We'd love to talk about it. Ronald, let's go.
Yes, sir. I mean, obviously coming off of that, one of the biggest things here is, obviously you've been killing the NBA. A lot of people have been following you for that reason. Can you talk a little bit about your handicapping style, specifically when it comes to the NBA? I know people look at stats, people look at the psychology aspect of it. People have like different strategies, right? One thing that I talked about before was like everyone has different handicapping styles, and if you're winning, right, if you have a style that is winning for yourself, you can always learn from others and kind of adapt in that way. But also, when people say, your handicapping style doesn't make any sense, like you're kind of getting lucky when you're winning, what do you think about that? Like I feel like everyone has their own style, and if they're winning, they don't have to change just because other people mention it, you know what I mean? So so back to that, your handicapping style, and what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I do think if you are winning, you don't necessarily have the winning strategy long term. And I will say that, having spent a lot of time in casinos and not only sports betting but playing poker, a lot of guys that win over small windows are not sustainable at all. And you see that in gambling Twitter a lot. I mean, obviously there's a huge influx of new handicappers across all different sports, all different angles, all different props, futures, baseball bets. Of course, we talked about no run first inning, one of the more controversial things going on in the sphere right now. But there's a lot of different angles. And I will say, just because you won over a month, 2 months, even 6 months or a year doesn't necessarily mean that you're a long-term winner, because clusters do exist longer than people think. That being said, as you guys know, having followed me for a period of years, obviously on my channel and the show with Jay Money, and of course now spreading this abundance to Ronald and all you guys in the chat. My first point of reference when I'm capping anything is just looking at the Vegas numbers. And a lot of people confuse this because they think that I'm looking at market movement when I talk about line functionality, as if I'm looking at all the bettors on the planet moving a line, assuming that sharps know something and the public does not, or vice versa. I'm not. I really don't want to know what anybody else is betting. I want to be able to look at the game as an entity within itself, psychologically and numerically, versus the Vegas algorithmic opening number. And then when I look at that number crossed with previous games, assuming, as I've discussed before, 3-point expectancy in terms of weighting home to road and the gaps in and out of that long term, that is my core strategy. That is line functionality. And I do want to emphasize that. I don't pay attention to the betting market at all. I'm looking at Vegas opening lines as my starting point, because I think something that is very important in life is understanding there's always somebody on the planet that knows more than you. Even top experts always have mentors, and they have somebody they look up to. I will say this: I don't know professional odds makers. I also don't know their computers very well on a personal level, but their computers are the sharpest thing you can find on this planet when it comes to numerical forecasting of sports. They're telling you what's going to happen in the game with their lines. You just have to know how to look at the lines.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about like the betting percentages, tickets versus money and stuff like that, to me, I really think that is very minimal to the capping process, right? Like it's probably one of the last things you actually even look at, if you look at it at all, in my opinion. Because when you go through all these sites, there's many sites here that have the percentages that you can look at, and none of them match up, right? If these numbers were true, you would see something that actually lined up at a certain perspective, at a certain point, right? But that's not happening. And the other thing too is you don't know what's actually moving the line here. It could be like an injury. It could be a sharp better. It could be a whole bunch of different aspects here. So they're really just looking at it from a surface level. The line moving the way it is, a percentage up or down, it really doesn't tell the story like it does, that people are really making it seem to be. Like reverse line movement and stuff like that. I don't believe in that type of stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely agree with the opening line and the line functionality, the way that you just explained it, right? So that's one thing that I actually learned from you, and that's one thing that I brought into my capping process. For me, I'm a little bit more analytical, but then also when you bring in another aspect of capping, you actually like tie that in together, right? Does it make sense? Does it actually follow the same way? Then you have another process that's supporting your play. and it just makes you feel a little bit more comfortable when you do that. So, dude, I love it. I love you sharing that. I think one thing that we see on gambling Twitter is really people just posting plays, no analysis, and what we do here is just another level of showing what our thought process is, and I think that's something that really needs to be seen by a lot of our viewers. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And with that, man, let's get into the NBA capping or the NBA playoffs real quick. Obviously we seen the Heat really take care of business yesterday. Just quick initial thoughts on what happened yesterday and kind of what you expect for the rest of the series.
Yeah, actually, I want to segue from the previous topic to this, and I want to make I just want to make one final point on that. Something that came to mind when you were saying that, how you can learn from people and also learn from yourself. Something that Jay and I talk about all the time, and shout out to Jay. He is an absolute amazing human being. I love to work with him every day. We're going to do a show at 5 o'clock, and it's amazing stuff. Jay has called himself Revenge Game Jay. And I said, I love it. I love it. And, one of the things that I actually advanced myself past was actually not just taking revenge games, because I used to do that as Revenge Game Shark, because I love revenge games, because it is such an incredible psychological angle to capping the game. But then you start to see where the number actually tells you the story, particularly last year with the COVID pandemic and a lack of fans, where revenge games actually became less consistent, if you will, without home fans in a stadium, where a team theoretically comes home off a road blowout, they get juiced up by their fans. All of a sudden they're not. They weren't getting the revenge element. And it's just a snapshot to where I am. And it's, again, centering on that whole conversation. I have looked at basically every angle over the course of time. From the beginning, looking at short favorites as the access point on a cheap price, to revenge games, to putting it all together. And as you said, you're always learning. And on that, we're learning a lot from the Miami Heat last night. I thought it was a fascinating game. Of course, we suggested on the show yesterday that Miami would be the side numerically. There was a 7-point jump from the regular season finale, which was, of course, 106-98 on a Boston -5 at home. Miami did win that one. And then it came back 7 points to Miami -2. So, of course, outside of the 3-point expectancy, you were getting actually 4 points of extra numerical weighting towards Miami. And it was an interesting game. Obviously, people took the first quarter, first half, assuming it would replicate game one against Atlanta and Philly. It did not. Boston came out and played a great first quarter, 28-25 win, and then backed it up with what has proved to be their favorite quarter on the road, the second quarter. They love the second quarter. They don't like something called the third quarter. And this has been a problem for them across the board. And you saw it last night. And I think anybody that knows anything about sports, again, deep psychology, knew Miami would come out of the locker room in the third quarter with a totally renewed defensive effort more than anything. And my biggest takeaway from the game purely was that. And I was watching the post game, and a bunch of the analysts were talking about one specific thing. Miami was contesting the first pass when they got across half court. And again, I'm not in the locker room. I'm not with the coaching circle. I do look at it obviously from a very professional standpoint, but I don't know exactly what the coaches are saying to these guys. Apparently, contesting the first pass is like unheard of in contemporary basketball. Maybe in 1987 it was a big thing because there was just no 3-point accessibility and whatnot. But you saw Jimmy Butler pick off the first pass at the top of the key twice, and it just jump-started this huge rally. And I mean, it was incredibly impressive. And it just goes to show you just how classy, professional, and deep and well-coached Miami is, because Miami turned up on them like no team has turned up on Boston this postseason so far. It was impressive.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, you're talking about contesting the pass right after the half, like the adjustments they made with Spoelstra, obviously. So if you guys follow me on Twitter, one of the things that I said at halftime was Miami did not look like they were trying in the first half. It looked like they were really just kind of seeing what's happening, right? And then Spoelstra made the adjustments at half. Obviously, they definitely looked differently defensively. Like you mentioned, Butler picking off those quick passes right at the half court line, basically. And it happened not only just Jimmy Butler, but I think it was Vincent maybe also who did it a couple of times as well. And so another thing to note too, I mentioned Tatum looked real tired right before the half. He played 23 of 24 minutes. He also put up 16 shots in the first half. One thing to note is when you play a defensive team, a strong defensive team like that, it takes a lot of energy to put up shots offensively. And he looked dead tired. And I knew that he was going to be either burnt out early in the third quarter, and obviously you've seen the Miami to kind of take over in that spot there in the third quarter. And then another thing is he didn't get out of the third quarter at all. So Miami had that little period in the beginning of the fourth quarter that they were able to kind of just chill and relax. You could kind of see Boston take advantage of that for a little bit before Butler came back in. So there's a little bit of a game flow. If you actually watch the game, you could kind of see and kind of anticipate what's about to happen next. So paying attention really does matter, especially specifically in the playoffs. And when you have great coaching minds too, if you can kind of see and kind of look to the past on the type of trends that Miami plays with versus specific teams. And I'll get to that later on when we cap that, the Warriors game too. There's just things that you can kind of see and expect and finally see the live betting aspect of it, or even full game. If you feel that you're comfortable even behind at halftime, dude, just go ahead and run with it. But yeah, so that is the Miami Celtics game. Do you want to throw any last minute notes on that, or do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, I do actually, because I've been talking about this for years, and I have this quote that, of course, I created. I love to do it. But Steph Curry changed the game for better or worse. And you look at the game last night, Steph Curry, Davidson College, 2009. All of a sudden, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum were 5 years old at the time. But here they are, hot and cold from three. And the whole game shifted. It wasn't just Jimmy Butler at the top of the key stealing and turning up the defense. It was an 0 for 10 three-point cluster. 0 for 10 three-point cluster, which just set them back in a minus 25 third quarter. And you go back to game 7 against Milwaukee, they outscored Milwaukee by 54 points from three-point land. So you look at how Boston functions, so incredibly dependent on the three ball. And it's not only their top players, it's most of their group outside of their bigs. They're just littered with shooters. So you're going to see this, and it makes it difficult to cap. We talk about this in the regular season all the time. Sometimes these quarters just go back and forth. Plus 12, minus 15, plus 16, minus 15. It's just all over the place. Zero consistency, and it's mostly because of the insane small window variance of three-point shooting, even for the top players on the planet. It's fascinating to watch. I can't say I love it for the sport. I do think it has peaked, and it will come back a little bit off this three-point dependency. Of course, as Steph is not influencing guys in the next 15 or 20 years directly, he will be retiring in 4 or 5 years, I would assume. But this is the peak of NBA three-point shooting pretty much historically, and the dependence on it is really insane, Ron.
It is. And speaking of Curry and the threes, let's talk about the Mavs and the Warriors. Well, in the regular season, the Mavs were 3-1 straight up and against the spread versus the Warriors, including 2-0 after the trade deadline. So with the current roster makeup of the Mavs, they kind of took care of business in those two games. But in those two losses, the Warriors didn't have Draymond or Iggy. Iggy's out today, I believe, but Draymond's playing, and Clay was out for one of them as well, and he's going to be active as well today. So they're coming into this one more rested as well. What are your thoughts coming into this one?
Yeah, well, official play. I got a 2-unit play on Twitter officially, and we're going to be talking about this in detail at 5 o'clock as well. But we will go into the details now because I know people want to hear this. And, truthfully, it is just a great side. It checks all the boxes. J Money in the chat, what's up, brother? And, you go back, and Ronald said it. Dallas owned them in the regular season. You know who else owned the Dubs in the regular season? Denver. Denver was 3-1 straight up in the regular season. Same exact dynamic, and you look at what happened in the first two games in the Chase Center in round 1 against Denver. 2 blowouts, 2 covers on very similar figures. And you really have to go even further back historically within this matchup. Dallas has owned them now for 3 or 4 seasons. Dallas has actually won 9 of the last 11 games against the Warriors. And as you mentioned, 3 of 4 this year. But all qualifier environments. As you mentioned, a lot of injuries for the Warriors. The first game in Dallas, Steph Curry was mired in a very unique shooting slump for him. He was just ice cold for like 4 or 5 straight games. Then it came back to the Chase Center, and the Warriors went off. 130-92, an absolute obliteration of the Mavericks on a -3.5. It came up to 4 again at home for the Warriors. And you look at what Dallas did there. Dallas was getting hammered there through 3 quarters, and Dallas turned up. Dinwiddie got hot. 4th quarter, Dallas 33-13. But again, if you look at that, the Dubs have hammered them for 7 out of 8 quarters at home this year. One isolated outlier where, again, you can call it an outlier. A Dinwiddie binge, a 13-point 4th quarter for the Warriors, and really just, again, the definition of an outlier. And you go through the psychology of this. You look at the Warriors' home calendar within the playoffs. They are 4-2 ATS. They're also coming off of a sequence of games against Memphis, where Memphis, really, if we're being honest, is just a tough out ATS without John Morant. All year, they were a cash cow. It continued into the playoffs, of course, up until Game 6. But if you look at home Game 1 against Denver, a blowout, and also home Game 1, remember that was Game 3 in the second round, an absolute blowout from the Warriors there as well. Dallas comes in here in a brutal spot. There's no way around it. Game 7 at Phoenix, a budding rivalry, if you will, between Devin Booker and Luka Doncic. A lot of shit talking. I mentioned this with the Timberwolves. I love it. You know, the sport has gone soft to a certain degree. Banana boats, AAU hangouts. I like when guys take their professionalism seriously. Doesn't mean they're going to fight off the court. They can go hang out and get some bottle service. But when you're on the court, take it seriously, talk a little shit. It makes the product better. And you really look at Game 7. I mean, that was just an absolute blowout. Dallas from the opening tip. They've shot incredibly well in back-to-back games, dating back to Game 6 as well. This is going to reverse itself. It's a Dubs number. Dubs final game of the regular season, 122-113 Dallas. Dallas -2 there. Now +5. That's a 7 gap. It's the same exact gap that existed last night between Boston and Miami. And you saw how Miami turned up at home. Official play, buy hat, engage, 2-unit special. Golden State Warriors -5. Rob,
Yes, sir. I do agree. And I do want to bring up some SDQL stuff here. This is some of the stuff that I really go into deep detail in on my normal show, the SDQ. Like, obviously, this show is called Let's Cap, and it's for a reason, because we want to be able to showcase, our ability to, or start a little bit of our process for capping this game. So what I brought here this is Spodes.com, one of the sites I use to pull information. What I brought up here is this season, when the Warriors were home favorites in conference games, they're 24-6 straight up, 15-13-2 against the spread right there. And you can kind of see there's like a 9 or 11-point gap there. But when you look into it a little bit further, right, you see some of these games here are in the playoffs. They've won every single home game as a favorite in conference situations. Obviously in the playoffs, it's conference games, but they've won every single game there at home. They are just 5-7 in those spots against the spread. If we look towards the regular season as well, we're seeing teams like the Kings here, the Blazers. So we want to kind of like get those guys out of there. What I did here was bring in playoff caliber teams with a winning record. So I'll just bring in when the opponent has a winning record of 50% or more, or greater than 50%. You can kind of see here it becomes 13-2 straight up, 10-4-1 against the spread. So a little bit more support here on the Warriors towards against the spread aspect of it, right? Again, it does include all of these playoff games. So this is a spot here that the Warriors really take advantage of and do well in. They're ready for these moments as a home favorites in the playoffs. Another thing to bring in too is, like, I don't only look at team trends here, right? I look at league-wide trends. So one thing that I looked up here, and I mentioned this before in some games, I want to look at teams in the playoffs with more rest than their opponent in game 1 of a series, right? So what I'm doing here is bringing in playoffs, and the rest is greater than their opponent's rest, and series game equals 1. Rest. Let's just bring this in first. Playoffs. Oh, there it is. In the playoffs, when they're the rest greater than opponent rest and series game equals 1. 41 and 24 straight up, 37-28 against the spread here. There's a 5-point gap, and obviously the line here is at 5. So you want to look into a little bit deeper, right? Because you don't know for a fact if the home team or the road team is the one with the more rested piece. So we go to add that they're the home team. 33-11, 27-17 against the spread historically. I think this database goes back to 2015, if I'm not mistaken. You see a 9-point gap here. About a 9-point gap here. So this is some of the stuff that I look at when I cap games. Obviously this is not, I don't blindly do these things. I don't blindly tell these things, but it's part of my capping process. And this is support for my reasoning. And also it backs other people like Shark, right? Shark has a different capping style. And if I can bring his capping style and put mine together and we see support on one side, obviously that's something that we're going to agree on and also put our money on. I mean, obviously to me, that's what you do with Punt School is my understanding. You guys have a little combination going there. You guys bring two different aspects of capping and put it together. And when you guys agree on something, boom, that's your play of the day. And even, obviously you guys sometimes you guys are going to have different viewpoints and stuff like that. That happens. But at the same time, bringing capping styles together is really what this community is all about. It's like Jay says, us against the bookies, right? It's not just me against the bookies, not just you against the bookies or me against you. It's really just trying to get the cash. That's what we're trying to do here. So I do agree with the Warriors here. So I'm loving that play. On that note, do you have any last notes or any other comments on this game here?
No, I think this database is fantastic, though. I see some people in the chat want to give a shout to my man Scott Archer on the West Coast. Great stuff. Akbar, what's going on, brother? A lot of people looking for these databases, and this is great stuff that you're presenting to them. Because obviously, as people know, I do tabulate my own information, and the psychological aspect is purely just my own witnessing of the product for 15 to 20 years. So it's hard to put that into a database. But this database, and you can probably link this to people, I mean, it's really just fantastic stuff. And again, we talk about this, but recency bias. I see Mitch Armstrong. We appreciate that comment. Recency bias is on Dallas. Of course, that is an incredibly impressive win. And but it's incredibly hard to back that up with a game one in a new series. And something somebody else had mentioned, which I did not mention, but I had definitely looked at. You got to remember that whole series before Game 7 was just home teams covering. The home team was 6-0 ATS in that round 2 matchup against Phoenix before the outlier in Game 7. Dallas did not come out particularly well Game 1, 2, or Game 5. So this is just checking all the boxes. Golden State Warriors, and I know Jay Money, the big fan. I pray that I can be a big fan one day with the New York Knicks. Maybe I'll be 95 years old and I'll have this opportunity to sit here and watch the playoffs with an actual passionate fan base. But the 11th pick last night, it seems to be the Knicks Nation forever. Win 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 games back into the regular season. Just enough games where we can't get a good pick. And we're stuck at the 11th pick again. So Knicks Nation, I see you guys. We'll fight through this, and it will get there maybe one day. But for now, it is a big-time Game 1, May 17th, 18th, 2022. Ronald, great stuff. Close them out.
Yes, sir. One more thing before we close it out. I do, we have a bunch of people here watching, and one thing that I want to add or ask you as a top capper here, what is one last thing? What is your top advice, your number one advice for those betting in sports, those who are new to betting in sports? Obviously you've been doing it for a long time, like we mentioned earlier. One thing that you want to pass on to these new bettors.
It's a long conversation, really. I would say I think that's probably the answer. Actually, I think that's probably the answer, is that there's really not one great piece of information. And that's why I say it's a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle. Don't expect professional results in something you're not committing full professionalism towards. Ronald's a perfect example of this. He just quit his day job to focus on this full time. I'm fortunate to have never worked for a company since 2009. It's given me the full life to commit to this. It's why I've been able to see so many angles, so many ebbs and flows, so many just depth points that people just don't have the time to take to see. If you want professional results, go for it professionally. Otherwise, that's why we are here for you. We put in the work, we'll bring it to you. And one final point, above all, manage your bankroll. There's never, ever a max bomb. You notice my top plays are 2-unit plays. My scale is 1 or 2. And sometimes personally I do go to 3, but I'm not doing it on Twitter because I know people are under bankroll. I know sports books are always encouraging deposit bonuses up to 1K, 1K buyback plays. If you lose, we get a rebate. People put in 1K and bet 1K. If you're betting $1,000 per game, you need to have $50,000 in that bankroll. $50,000. And that's not money that you're using for your expenses either. It's a separate bankroll. And remember, the reasoning behind this is because there's always the opportunity for something to go awry that is unexpected. And your emotional self, you cannot predict how you as a person are going to feel if it goes awry and you're over mortgaged and all of a sudden you feel despair. It's why people tilt. It's why they press bets. And unbelievably, this is why bookies make so much freaking money.
I definitely agree with that. Bankroll management is definitely one of the top pieces of making sure you have that in line before you really start sports betting. So I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Maybe we could do something on money management, like another show, like specifically on money management, just for people to come back and just be like, learn from, so yeah, obviously this is the end of the show, guys. I really appreciate you guys all in the chat room, everyone tuning in both on Twitter and YouTube here. Obviously, just show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Make sure you check us out on Twitter, Sharks and Sports, and then myself, you_capper. Make sure you check out the links in the description below. And also, I always want to end with this, guys. I always have to end with this because you guys need to remember this. Whether you fade us or follow us, it's really on you guys to make that call. You're pushing the buttons. It's your money. You guys are making that decision. But, obviously, good luck on all you guys' action. Till next time. Peace.